Thank you all very much for coming to our session. Stop wishing for executive support using principles of influence. My name is Gabe Abella. This is Adam Chu. We're both coaches at JP Morgan Chase. And we're here to share our story about how you can generate some demand, some interest for your coaching services, and even Kanban, or whatever else you might be doing that will potentially keep you pretty busy. And also do introduce ideas in a humane way, which is kind of our goal of working in Kanban and introducing humane change. So the way this is going to work is that we're going to take you through our case study. And through our case study, you will do a bunch of exercises, and I'll also potentially walk away with some of your own strategies to bring to your own practice. Anything else maybe to add? Okay, so you're all going to hate me, but we need to, as you're all seated now, we're going to do a few quick exercises. You'll all know whoever sitting down has claimed a seat, so that will be yours. But if I could ask you to stand up right now. And we're going to do a quick sociogram just to get...
What I'm going to be talking to you today is, how many people have heard of Robert Cialdini? Right, so a couple of people here, that's great. And you probably saw within our title, we put hashtag influence. That's a big part of our presentation here today. This book has been around for quite a while. It's actually in the 3rd edition. It's been published in many, many countries in many languages. But what it essentially does, it covers the principles of influence, right? The principles of influence, there's 6 of them that he covers. Liking, social proof, authority, scarcity, commitment, and reciprocity. We're going to go through each one to give you a sense for what they are. But before we do that, just a quick definition of what influence is, right? Very generic definition of influence. How it relates to this conference, as you know, we're part of the Kanban North America Conference. Influence is going to be the tool that we're going to be highlighting for you as a way to pull, right? So Kanban obviously is a very big, the big secret here is we want to pull people into changing their behaviors. So you heard Marissa's talk this morning in the keynote, so this aligns along with that, right? Influence is trying to get people to change their behaviors in different ways without forcing it. But before we go any further, this is almost like a warning slide, right? These tools that we're going to share with you in the book, Cialdini actually calls them weapons of influence. Weapons of influence. Because they are very powerful, and they could be used for either good or for bad. And we're here to tell you that if you're going to learn these tools, you need to use them in a very responsible and ethical way, right? This is what we profess, because these are things that you can do to actually change behaviors and change and kind of modify the way people think, right? So we want to put this slide up here to kind of remind you ethical use of influence. So now we can go on. So the very first principle that Cialdini covers is the principle of reciprocity. Right, so you see that picture right there? When you go to a restaurant, what's the first thing that you expect sitting at the table?
Bread.
Bread, right? Do they charge you for the bread typically? Well, here in the US they don't, but I don't know elsewhere. But is the bread free? Usually, right? Yeah, you expect it, right? So that's the first. That's actually a good example of what reciprocity role is. When we're given something, we're actually more obligated to actually want to give back, right? So the restaurant giving you bread is kind of saying, hey, you know, we appreciate you being here. It's just some free bread, and we want your business, right? So in reciprocity, this is a tool that's very powerful. Actually, we leverage this one quite a bit with everything we do. The human instinct is to want to have to give back when somebody gives you a gift. Now again, this principle can be used in a negative way, right? So somebody will try to give you a free gift and say, oh, here's a free gift. And now we expect some donations, right? Anybody ever receive those mailers with all of your names and free stamps? And you're like, this is great. I've always wanted my name on these nice, it's great for the holidays. And then right underneath it, they're asking you for a donation. You feel kind of bad, right? Because they've already given you the free product. And now they're expecting you some sort of donation. So it's very hard for me to throw that out and go, I didn't ask for it. they give me a free gift. Reciprocity is very powerful because as human beings, we tend to want to give back when we're given something, right? So that's the very first principle. Second principle in the book is consistency and commitment. Consistency and commitment means we feel compelled to be consistent with what we've said in the past, right? So how many people have had potlucks in their organizations? You know, it's kind of a nice social thing that we do during the holidays and whatnot. And you usually get something like this, right? Potluck sign-up sheet. Once you put your name up there, how bad would it look if you don't show up with that tuna casserole, right? So you want to be consistent with, all right, I promise I'm going to bring something into the office so we can all share and actually have a nice holiday potluck. So the principle of consistency and commitment is actually a public show of commitment, right? So you need to have that commitment publicly, and it shows that you're willing to commit to something and that you're going to be consistent with your actions as well once you put it out there, right? So that's why a lot of times people, when they go through diets, I've done this myself, you will commit yourself publicly. Like you'll do it on Twitter and say, all right, my goal is to lose 20 pounds, and you ask people to kind of keep me honest, right? So you want to be consistent with that pledge, right? And we all have these apps that daily tracks how many things you've eaten, right? That social pressure causes you to changes your behavior, right? So again, second principle, consistency and commitment. Next, social proof. This is, again, one of the most powerful ones that we've found in organizations. What it says is, when people are uncertain about what they need to do, they look around and see what other people are doing, and they basically follow along. This is usually a heuristic or a shortcut, usually in times of stress. When you find yourself in a situation that you're unsure of, the shortcut is just do what everybody else is doing, right? So in this picture, anybody ever been part of the Santa Run? This is a very famous thing, I think out in California. Everybody dresses up in Santa costumes and they run a marathon. But you're like, yeah, this is now a norm behavior, right? So this is social proof that, hey, we can all do this, right? So social proof is powerful in that once you have a few people behaving in that way, you make it safe for others to follow suit, right? That's what social proof is. So that's the third principle. Next, liking, right? Liking says we're more likely to agree with somebody's request if we know and like them. So again, we show this picture here because I'm sure most of these people probably don't even know each other, but the fact that they're all dressed up like Star Wars clones or Jedis makes them probably more open to each other if there was a request, right? Say, hey, could you guys, come help me with my costume, it's falling apart. Yeah, we're all together. So it's kind of almost like a tribe, if you will, right? So people who identify themselves with others, either background, race, things that you say, yeah, I can see myself doing that. So this principle of liking, you're more open to people that you're more familiar with, right? Or have some sort of common background. The next principle is authority, right? The authority principle says you tend to obey figures of authority and people with titles, right? Sometimes without even questioning, right? So anybody familiar with some of these actors here, right? So if you watch any of these US TV shows, these are people that play doctors, very famous Doogie Howser, right? These guys from Scrub. And they did this commercial. I love this commercial. If you've never seen it, they basically walk around and they tell you facts, and they kind of make fun of themselves. Because we're known as doctors, people listen to us, and this is why you should listen to us, because on TV we play doctors, right? But that's a really powerful effect too. I think some of you may know some of the studies they've done. I think out in Stanford, where they had people in just lab coats. They look like doctors, and they say, all right, we're going to have you be part of an experiment. And you're basically going to give shocks to these people sitting behind this glass mirror, right? And you're just going to go and tell them to keep doing this to people that they can see. And of course, the people who are getting the shock, they weren't really getting shocked, but they were acting like every time they pushed the button, they were getting shocked. But they were listening. They just kept shocking them because the authority said, yeah, keep doing it, keep doing it. This is part of the experiment. It's a very powerful thing. Authority in terms of influence. Next one is the principle of scarcity. Scarcity is when we perceive something to be more valuable than it is when there's less of it, right? So just quick explanation, how many people are big whiskey fans here? Right, so some of you probably know what this picture is about if you're a big whiskey fan, especially bourbon. This is the, I'm not gonna go too much geek into whiskey, but this is a very well-known line of whiskey. Typically, sales price, you could buy a bottle for about $40, $50 normally. But because it is so scarce, and you can kind of see, they're actually telling you, they usually evaporate 85% in the barrel. And so there's very small amount that actually comes out. So any of these bottles, each one of these bottles probably between $1,500 to $2,000 on the secondary market. And people are very much willing to buy these bottles because they are so scarce, right? So the scarcity principle says things are perceived to have more value when there's less of it, right? So these are the 6 principles that Cialdini talks about in the book Influence. What we would like for you to do now is actually, Gabe has passed out these what do we call it, sextant or quadrants, and basically what we want you to do. Oh, we want to do the big one first. Okay. Yeah. Why don't I do this?
All right, we are now going to leverage the wisdom of the room, because all of you have been subject to these principles in your real life. Now you have a name for that, these techniques. I'm going to give you some examples. And what we'd like for you to do now is, with the stickies on your table, give examples of when you've been subjected to any of these principles before, or if you've done them or you've noticed them in the world. So we give you the freebies for reciprocity was free bread. The freebie for liking was finding someone similar to you. So if someone came from the same hometown as you, or you like the same sports team, that would actually make someone more likely to listen to you if you find some common ground with somebody. Scarcity, when something is less available, you want it more. Authority is when someone has a presence of authority, or at least even titles or letters behind their name. They will likely, at least initially, be perceived as more credible. Social proof is when you're looking for examples of something else that someone is doing, right? If you have never done it before, you might look for them to do that. And consistency commitment is actually then doing some other public display of commitment, such as a Twitter announcement of my commitment to lose 20 pounds. What other examples do you know or have you heard of that you've been exposed to these principles? So I'll walk you to get up, and then we'll give you some hints around the way, and then we'll debrief after that. But let's see if you can come up with some of your own ideas, because you've probably done these. You might even do them and not even know the name of it, or they've definitely been used on you a lot. Okay, let's take a shot. Thank you. Anybody see anything particularly interesting that they hadn't thought of before on the boards? Bill.
Well, somebody put CrossFit over by social proof. I would love to hear more about that.
Who put CrossFit? Who put CrossFit? Nisha?
Social proof in terms of strength and mobility. Usually a lot of folks that do CrossFit, myself included, are extremely competitive, and part of what pushes me to push harder is the social proof that there's someone stronger than me. And I want to show the other people that I'm, competing with, that I'm stronger than them. So, it's a thing.
Any other interesting things you saw on the board? Okay, here's what we're gonna do for the rest of the session here. You each have your pieces of paper. Some of you started to write down the principles, which is great. These are yours. You can write down each of the 6 principles in whatever order you want. We kind of showed them in order, but whatever order you want. As you go through the session today, if you find an interesting piece of, an interesting example of a influence principle, You can write that down, that'll be part of your strategy. What might you be doing, what could you start doing in your own practice, in your organization, that might be useful, you can do right away, or maybe with a little bit of effort. So these are starting points. You might see things already that you can already do right now. We'll give you our examples. This is sort of your own worksheet to take away with your own strategy for applying the principles of influence. All right, so how do we use the principles of influence? We have a few strategies that we came up with. So the first thing is, reciprocity is free. You guys know what we mean by that?
That because of the nature of that lever, if you put something out there, you're going to get a return on that investment.
Yeah. What could that thing you put out there be? What could you give for free? Advice. Your time.
Listening.
Yeah.
You may want to limit, like combine those principles of
Reciprocity.
reciprocity and the limit of your time.
Yes.
So saying all right, I will give you 2 15 minutes coaching sessions.
Mm. Louder.
Who else didn't get it?
Okay. Reciprocity is free if you have something someone does not have. If you came to this conference and someone was interested in what the conference was about, and you spent literally just 5 minutes telling them some of the things that you saw, or even show them your piece of paper, say you can take this, they now have some psychological debt to you, and it will accrue. So you don't have to pay for reciprocity. The things that we've done is when we'll actually throw a road show, and when people come to a road show, what happens when you come to a conference? What's the first thing that you got? Even almost, what's the first thing you had after you got at this conference after you got your badge? You got a bag of stuff, right? Yeah. Almost every event that we do internally, someone walks away with something. And it doesn't have to be expensive. It could be lanyards, it could be stickies, it could be something, right? Think about what you could do on very, very cheap. And that's the other thing. You do not, even if you do give something that costs something, it does not have to cost a lot. It just has to be a token of that generosity. Okay? As you mentioned, Pablo, we want to combine principles. You will see this as we go through our case study. You're going to stack them. You're going to be super powerful. They're actually you're going to see better results if you stack things. And then lastly, let your social proof do the talking. So I'm going to give you a little, I'll tell you right now. So for us, our social proof are our students, our clients, anyone we've given advice to that had a good outcome, that actually appreciated what we did. Once you do good work, that becomes social proof. Now the way you engage that is you have them talk about you. And some of the ways that we do that is we'll host webinars, right? We'll write an article about that person, or that person will write an article about their own experience and share it internally. But it's much better if they do it than if I do it as a coach or someone that's potentially selling something. It's going to be way more powerful if you get your own social proof to be your own evangelists. Okay. So we have it saying, make them the hero. Your clients are your heroes, right? So if you have a chance to talk about them, you talk about how great they are, and then you put them up on stage. So whether that's a webinar, whether that's a call, whether that's an article, whether that's an actual roadshow with them up on stage, right? Now they are. What's that?
Or for you guys, LinkedIn.
LinkedIn, yeah, there we go.
You do a great job.
Thank you, man. All right. Okay, so those are our key strategies for influencing. We will refer to many of these, and then if we mention one, we don't actually name it. Anyone's welcome to call us out. You notice that there's a principle that we kind of skipped. We'd be happy to have you call us out as we go through the case study.
Some of you may have remembered back in 2017, I think it was, at LKNA. I talked about this concept of crossing the chasm. So most of you probably know this concept as well. Somebody was just showing us, who's tweeting this picture, and Dave is going to be giving this to you as a template as well. Book written by Jeffrey Moore, organizational psychologist, well-known author. Basically described in very good detail the innovation curve, right? So some people call it the technology innovation curve, some is the innovation adoption curve. But basically the thought is, as new ideas and new concepts are introduced to any environment, how much it gets accepted has to go through a process. This process is known as this innovation adoption curve. Not only that, there is this chasm that happens right here, and you'll see it in the picture that we're passing out. But there's certain groups that live within this model, right? So that's kind of what I'm going to be kind of giving a very quick picture on. So this is what you're going to be receiving, and we give this to you so that you can actually, as you're listening to our case study, you can begin identifying who are the players in our business case, and where do they belong in each of these frames of reference. So let's talk about the innovators first, right? So at the very left-hand side of your picture, these are people who are always looking for the newest ideas, right? For them, it doesn't even have to be proven yet. They just want innovation. They're drawn to it. They're the ones that actually don't care if it doesn't work. They're willing to try. So these are your risk takers, if you will, right? So sometimes you hear them called as techies, but they're really the risk takers of the big picture. Some of these pictures, just to show, are the ones that come up with the brand new ideas and willing to take the risk to expose themselves and their reputation to say, here's a brand new way, let's try this, right? So these are your innovators. They're a very small percentage. Not too many people have the have the stomach to kind of do these things. So then your next group is your early adopters, right? Those are the next section on the left-hand side of that curve. The early adopters are more concerned with, how do we market this? What is the business opportunity here, right? We love the idea. It may fail, it may flop, but there might be some huge returns, so it's kind of risk versus reward. These are the people that are willing to sponsor it, right? So how many people are fans of Shark Tank, right? That's their whole game. They want people who are coming up with innovative things, and then they're gonna say, we're gonna give you the capital to scale this out, right? We're gonna make millions. And that's kind of the point of what the early adopters are about. Now, here's the interesting part. The early adopters are influenced by the innovators, right? They're the ones that are going to spend the money and say, all right, that's a great idea, let's go with it. So these guys are the ones not coming up with the ideas, they're the ones backing it, right? So they're the ones that are actually going to make it happen. So then the next group you have is the early majority. So the early majority comes after the chasm. So you'll notice on your sheet of paper, there's a huge chasm there, right? The early majority means a good part of the population that are going to start saying, you know what, this is actually a good innovation. Maybe this is something we can use to get some sort of advantage to our competition, right? So, but these are the people that are waiting for it to become more of a reliable thing, a reliable product or service. They're the ones that are then going to buy into that, right? So they're actually being influenced by the early adopters. So usually they're listening to the early adopters, be it your Mark Cubans or your, whoever those people are that are going to be the big investors. This is a good picture of it, although it's a little bit outdated, iPod, right? But this is in Costco. This is now, go buy an iPod in Costco. It's widely accepted. The next group we have in the crossing the chasm is your late adopters, your late majorities, right? So these are the people that once all the bugs have been worked out of the system, right? They're very much risk averse. So once it's become a standard, they're willing to actually give it a try and say, all right, this is now a thing. I guess this is what we're gonna have to learn to start living with. So willing to wait until it becomes more of an widely accepted standard. And then finally, your laggards, right? So I apologize for anybody here, anybody working for Nokia. This is where it's too late, right? These are the folks that reject any new innovation and say, you know what, it's not for us. Let's not even worry about it until you have no choice. So this image for me was kind of a funny thing. It's like, okay, now let's do the smartphone. But laggards, usually they say it's usually not worth investing in anyway at this point. But at some point they are part of the curve. So with that being said, what are some of the key strategies we're going to use to cross that chasm, right? There are some strategies that you can use for crossing the chasm, and you heard me say it. First of all, the big one is go in order, right? So there's a tendency, or there's a desire to sometimes skip the step. It's like, let's just go all the way to, let's go from innovation all the way to early maturity. You have to respect the process. The reason for that is, and you probably have heard this, is you have to build up your market first, right? You have to actually have people follow what you're trying to do and buy what you're selling. You have to actually follow the process of going through innovation, then early majority, and then finally crossing the chasm into the large majority. So that actually says be patient, right? This actually happened to us several times in our journey. In our previous life, before we moved to the new organization, we actually went through this process, right? And we were becoming very successful. So much so that other executives started approaching us and, hey, you guys are doing great things here, right? We would like to bring you in and actually have you do the same to us. So would you mind going from 5,000 to 10,000 large? And we actually had to say, wait, hold on, wait a minute. We haven't even finished establishing ourselves in this group of 5,000. We're still trying to make ourselves known here. So we actually had to be patient and say, no, that's too much for us. We had to say that maybe at a later time, but you have to be patient. You have to wait to go through the process and say, all right, we are now able to cross the chasm. And then one thing that comes up again, you heard this earlier, is let your social proof do the talking for you, right? Where you have success, where you've established success with your early majority, have them tell the story, right? Each of the preceding groups influence the next group, right? That's something that actually is a known thing in the book. So you have to have them tell their stories of why did it work, show the social proof, and actually have them persuade the new people and the new groups that are following on. So these are the key strategies for us when it comes to crossing the chasm. We would like now to have you, do we want them to fill out, or as we go? You want to go? All right.
All right, so I'm going to kick you off into the next exercise. Actually, what we'll do is we'll just blend that into the break, if that's okay. I'll kick you off. So essentially what we'd like to do now is, by the way, so when we answered the question, what now, we were very thoughtful about who we chose. We knew that they were going to be innovators. So that team, we call them Moonshot, was our very first team that we put on here. Now, what we'd like for you to consider is if you are in an organization or a market, either external or internal, there are probably clients or target markets in there that you might have dealt with in whatever order you've dealt with. Sometimes if you deal with them out of order, it actually will be worse for you because then you won't have the social proof and people might kick you out before you're done. So what I ask you now is think about an organization that you've engaged in what are, if you've had some traction there, what are the names of either the teams or the individuals that you've serviced that were the innovators, right? And that were the early adopters. And then were you able then to successfully cross the chasm, which led to more of your successful engagements? And by the way, when the reason that we call it the chasm as well is one, it's hard to cross, but once you do, it's self-sustaining momentum. But it's hard. It's actually is it 13.5? It's like 16.5% of a population. That once you do that, the early majority automatically gets engaged, and they start doing the work for you to then start generating the social proof. So as an exercise, if you have worked in an organization of some size at some time, I'd be curious to see it. I'd love to see if you could take some of your stickies and put the names of the teams or the people and figure out if you actually crossed the chasm. And even use relative to the number of people in the organization, who was the first person that you engaged? Were they really an innovator? And by the way, think of your past engagements. If the first one you took on never stuck, they were probably the wrong target. They were probably a laggard, right? Now, additional to this is that the reason it's important is because in your organizations, people are going to be motivated to want your services in different ways, right? There's positive motivations and negative motivations, right? What would be some negative motivations to ask or need for training or coaching services? Yes?
Deliberate sabotage, so that they could say, look, we tried having coaches, and it just wasn't worth it.
Yeah? What else? Anyone going through a mandated transformation? Anyone? X number of agile teams by the end of the year? Okay. They will show up. They'll tell you whatever they need to tell you to make it look like they're an innovator when they're a laggard. And this will destroy your actual momentum, actually sabotage your momentum before you even get started. So we're going to call a break. Just curious, did anyone actually do their own? Anyone brave enough? That's okay, you win. Yeah, this is our example.
Were you here all week? Till Wednesday.
This actually does reflect, so we know the size of our organization. These are actually teams or programs. It could be one or more, like each sticky could represent one or more, whatever, Scrum teams. Or it could still be anywhere from 8 to 50 or 60 people. So we actually knew the size of our population. We did cross the chasm. Notice that these are the remainder of the teams or whatever organization we have not engaged, and they're not on the chart yet. The reason is you don't know until you engage them. So any one of these could be the next one, and we'll get to how you choose the next one later on. But you don't know where they are. You can guess. As of right now, a short story. This is actually, so we created this and actually transcribed it into PowerPoint and gave it to one of our executives. And decided not to use it because they didn't like the word laggard. They said change the word laggard. And we said, no, that's the name of the model. You can't go and change, it's not my model.
We're going to call up Jeffrey Moore and say, hey, change your model.
So anyway,
What's the problem?
yeah. All right, so this would be, again, useful for you to help you understand who to target and then how at what point might you see some momentum. And it really is kind of weird. We've crossed the chasm 3 times now in 3 different organizations. And right around that early majority part, it's just really weird. People start coming out of the woodwork. Like, hey, I heard you do this thing. We're next. We want to be next. So it has happened. All right, let's keep going. Yeah, that one.
Yeah.
All right. The Kanban guide for Scrum teams. We turned this into a webinar. I turned this into a webinar. And what principle is in play now? What principle, based on the way, this is actually what the email looked like. Come dial in.
Social proof?
Social proof? What else?
Authority.
Liking? Authority. Why? Who's the authority on this screen right now? So the opposite of we don't, just so you know, the opposite of we don't do Kanban is we do Scrum. And that's all we do. But the guys who wrote Scrum Guide invented Scrum. On their website, you can actually download this thing here. So that was the point for us, which is, here's the big takeaway of this. The people that wrote Scrum and invented Scrum say it's okay to do Kanban.
It's illegal now.
In your face.
Super popular webinar. Actually, 200 people live. That's a lot for us. 200 people live internally, and then a ton of follow-up work, with just questions, right? So it was helpful in that you're actually able to use authority from the authority to actually get what we wanted, which is actually then to legitimize, right? So it's no longer a dirty word. So the other way to say it is that the creators of Scrum said that Kanban useful for helping you in Scrum in 3 ways. In the sprint, before the sprint, and after the sprint. You can borrow that, but essentially, that's what this guide says. And you could put a picture, I actually had a picture of Ken Schwaber, right, and Sutherland together, right, because they're this people here. The home of Scrum says Kanban is okay. All right, so that is our use of our influence principle of authority. They gave us authority to use Kanban. Never heard much about it again. All right, what do we do next now? So, we're going to get into another activity. Okay, so Adam, you can start.
So, just kind of set this up a little bit on why we're showing fitness for purposes. After some time, we actually got a lot of hires. So we crossed our chasm. We actually had a lot of people seeking us out and trying to get us to help them with their whatever they were doing, right? So we didn't give it a name. So we had a lot of demand. We self-generated actually quite a bit of demand. And we were being requested not just within our own smaller hierarchy, we started getting a lot of requests from the outside hierarchy as well. And said, hey, you guys are killing it. Can you guys come over and help us? There were random requests. Hey, can you teach us, come on, can you run a webinar? Can you do a workshop? Can you do a lot of things? And again, because we had gone through this multiple times, we knew that that's good. That comes with good and bad, right? We needed to be very careful about what we engage and how we engage so that we don't overburden ourselves, right? So we started taking a look at where's our demand coming from. There's a lot of demand coming in, and not all demand is equal, so all of you guys know this. So there's some demand that's probably better for us, better suited for us for our larger goal, right? What we're trying to do. So we're leveraging a concept here that we're going to share with you, known as the market segmentation framework. And this comes straight out of David Anderson and Alexei Zeglov's book. How many people here have read the book already? So you guys already know what we're going to be getting into. But we were trying to decide what our market was, right? Because not only do we have our primary sponsor to serve in terms of their demand, but now we're getting a lot of traction with we're creating a lot of influence, right? And a lot of that was due to, again, writing our own articles, having people talk to each other, have the early adopters and the early majority start talking to other people. It generated a lot of demand. So we needed to actually have a way to visualize what our demand was and where it actually fits within our goals, right? So this is kind of the market segmentation analysis template. We're going to fill it out together. But before we fill this out, the first thing I want you to do is grab these little stickies. I want you to approach this exercise this way. I want you to write down every service you provide, whether you're an internal coach, trainer, or external consultant. Think about every service you provide, for your clients, right? So go ahead and take a moment to do that. Use multiple stickies. Try to use one service per sticky. Just write them out. Okay. All right, so thank you for doing that. So again, you're not going to be able to write down it because I'm sure you guys provide a lot of services. So we're going to start out with a few, and then if you want to continue on with this later, you can absolutely do this. So we're going to fill this out together, like I said. So the first thing is I want you to fill out at the top left-hand side under market segment, target. All right, so this segment is the target population that you're actually targeting. Write that down, target. And then the next part obviously is going to be non-target, right underneath. So we're going to very simply create target and non-target. Okay, and then towards the bottom, I want you to put satisfactory towards the bottom right. Left-hand side of the fitness level. Then mediocre. And then finally unsatisfactory. your market segmentation template should look like this. Now is the actual step we take the actual stickies you created and actually populate where do you believe in terms of, so you want to do it after? I was going to disclose after. Yeah. I want you to populate this template based on how your clients perceive your service, right? So it's either unsatisfactory, mediocre, or satisfactory. But along with that, don't forget the other axis, which is for the service that you're actually providing, is it target or is it non-target? Meaning for that segment, that market segment, are those clients the people that you are actually intending to target for what you're providing, right? So all those stickies you have, they either fall under, would they say what you provide is actually unsatisfactory, is it mediocre, or would they say, no, this is actually satisfactory? What my consultant, what my coach does, they provide us service. And then for that service you do provide, are those clients actually target or non-target? Okay. I'll let everybody kind of put where they think. Yeah, question?
Like they're not really still struggling. Like non-target would be like accidental customers or.
So let me give you an example. And again, I don't want to anchor too much, but sometimes we're part of organizations where we have irrefutable demand because there were leftovers from other people's responsibility and you just kind of inherited. So now you're going to have to provide coaching to this group that's not even part of your group. But they said, well, we used to do this and you're still doing it.
Another example of a service that you might want to do, anyone ever get requests to can you help us write better stories?
Yep.
Anyone ever get that? Yeah, we don't like that either. So that for us, that's non-target, and actually the way we teach it's unsatisfactory. So we want to actually do something about that.
No,
People are asking you things you don't want to do.
Okay, so it's target as defined by us.
By you.
By you, yeah.
Okay.
What
So,
business do
this
you want to
is-
be in?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Good
What business do
clarification.
you want to be in as a service provider in your organization? You want to be known for helping people write better stories, or do you want to be doing, end-to-end flow?
Here's another common one. Hey, can you show us how to put this in this X tool? Okay. Sure.
Yeah, the Jira jockey.
Hey, don't name. We're not judging here.
It's a role.
Okay, so I see most people have, does anybody need a few more minutes to complete? All right, go ahead. I'll give you a few more moments before I show you each of the segments here. Okay, so I know some of you are still finishing, but I'm gonna keep going. So something I'm noticing also, there's a couple of tables. I know some people work together, so they're already looking at each other's and having some very interesting discussions right now. So I'll share with you this. This is a very powerful tool. Because one, you're visualizing what's in here on this, right? And once you put it somewhere, it causes people to want to challenge that or not challenge it, right? Because now you're kind of saying, this is where we are, and people are like, oh. So yeah, it's a very useful tool in that respect. So let me share with you what each of these sections mean. So if you have services that are sitting over here, these are the things that, again, you're doing satisfactory and are target. You consider things that are aligned to your goals. You should probably continue to protect, encourage, and grow those things, right? So continue to feed that that demand. The next section, if you have anything in here, is you may want to seek some improvements to make your service more robust or better for your clients, right? What you're providing, right? Seek to include some improvements. And if you find yourself over here, you might want to question yourself: is this something still worth pursuing? Should we be looking for new targets? Like, we're obviously not doing too good of a job over here with the service. Should we continue to provide this? If you have anything over here, clearly switch it off, right? You're not doing a good job anyway at it, and that was never your intent to kind of target this market. So just switch it off, right? Save you some time and energy and heartache. This one, if you find yourself in the mediocre and a non-target, you might be overserving your customer, right? You might be overserving, and you might want to consider switching that one off. right? It all depends on your context. So that's what they're saying. And then finally, if you find yourself in this segment where you're doing really good, and we find a lot of teams that actually find themselves, strangely enough, in this quadrant, they may want to modify their strategy or consider improvements elsewhere, because you're spending a lot of time and energy over here, right? For a non-target area that you might be able to spend some more time and energy elsewhere, right? So this is a very good tool, like I said, to visualize for yourself as an individual. See, you have these as yourself, but you can use it as a team tool or as an organizational tool. And some very interesting conversation occurs after you populate it, and people start having conversation about what's really happening, right, on this template. So,
All right, so then,
I'm
you
gonna
want
take
to
it.
take.
Yeah, I'll take it. All right, so this is the start of this activity. We're gonna take it one step further because we're trying to generate, we're trying to also use our principles of influence. So these are people you've already served. So this is kind of looking back, retrospective. These are people you already served. So we want to do something now and figure out if we can be robust or anti-fragile in our organization, which is we've already been fired, depending on how you count. Let's say we've already been fired once. How can we create more angels in the organization should we have a drastic change in leadership? And also, by the way, make a huge impact on the organization by hopefully introducing more Kanban practices to this organization. So I have this law. Until someone else says that they have it, I'll continue to put my name on it. For every functional unit in a bureaucracy, there exists an equal and opposite functional unit. So ketchup and tomato, they definitely are going together. That's one way to create a bureaucracy. Let's take a look at our organization. So, we're here, and the funny thing is, this organization, if you live in a bureaucracy, has a doppelganger organization that looks just like you. Let's consider ways in which you could split up your bureaucracy. What are ways in which your organizations divide themselves? Anyone want to take a few passes at it? So if I say business is one part of the organization, then what would the other part be?
Technology.
If there was commercial, what would the other part of the organization be?
Residential.
Okay. If there was risk, what would the other one be?
chaos.
Yeah. Finance. So, if you're an organization and you're in a bureaucracy such as we live, you have more options than you think you do to generate demand. So the funny thing is, yes, there is a doppelganger chief agility officer or somebody else. Hopefully that person actually says, we do Kanban, we don't know. And there's some other team in another organization trying to do something just like you. That's probably interested in your help. So we're trying to widen the net here a little bit, right? Generate, look at more of our options. So not only does we have a doppelganger, then there's another team here as well. Then they've got a doppelganger on my side that I don't even know exists, right? So you actually can use the bureaucracy against itself and just generate the options that you didn't think you had before to provide your services. And then there's some other places outside of your mountain, because this is a huge organization, right? There's other places that might be interested in your services. So our the type of demand that we're generating now, interest, would be things that maybe you should seem like a natural thing, right? But certainly if we're in technology, the next people that came calling was operations. So the people running the call centers, improving the call centers. They were the next people. If you're in technology, then there's probably a product group. And that product group, by the way, is trying to manage their demand. You can't do that with Scrum. I know anyone else can do that. It doesn't tell you in the Scrum guide how to manage demand, right? That's why the Kanban guide for Scrum says you use Kanban before the sprint, in the sprint, and after the sprint. Other interesting areas which we are now engaged in would be our firm-wide learning and development team. Firm-wide learning and development. Does anyone know who the doppelganger is of firm-wide learning and development? Yeah, it's not really good. Yeah, I like that. It's actually, the firm-wide learning and development is training all of the, line people. And of course there has to be a special organization to train all the executives. So they get the executive training. So then now we started engaging firm-wide learning and development, and then executive management or executive leadership development called us, because like, well, you can't teach everyone that and not have the leaders know that. So that is also another opportunity then to figure out where you might be able to provide your services. So what we're going to do now is just take, how much time? There we go. All right. So this is now, we're going to take this, this worksheet just one step further. I'm going to ask you to do something that I don't normally do. I'm going to ask you to speculate. I want you to consider new targets. Now these are actual groups or lines of business, whatever it is that exists in your world. Who could you speculate you might want to add to these boxes that you start pursuing, that you might not have considered if you didn't realize that there were doppelgangers in your organization? So take a moment right now, and and if anyone has any really cool ideas that we haven't already pursued, I want to hear them. So just take about 30 seconds right now. You can write, by the way, write it on a different color sticky. That way you'll know what it is. Think about, yes.
Can you just repeat the ask again?
So think now about different target markets that you haven't considered and have already served. So now the stickies you put are the work you do and the clients you already serve. Now I want to think about new markets. Who are the other people you might not have considered would be consumers of your stuff? Okay? Just take 30 seconds. Think of some new targets. Anybody come up with a target market they may not have considered? Anyone want to share?
Is it something that you want to serve, but you haven't thought about?
Yeah. Yeah. Anything? Yeah.
I mean, you have HR, finance, marketing, things like
Yeah.
that.
HR, absolutely.
QA and release management.
Ooh, okay. Yeah. Done.
Infrastructure.
Infrastructure. Oh, target rich.
E-commerce.
Target rich. Right. Yeah. What else?
Process improvement group.
Ah. Okay. So other potential coaching groups, maybe. That's what they do. Okay. So we wanted to, because in order to serve your organization, you have to also then, you can also leverage your existing social proof to generate the demand outside of your organization. Yes?
So question, so you're expanding out into other markets, but how do you balance that with, I can't even support the market I'm in, and now I'm expanding out?
Yeah, I have to say your question, big long inside.
Yes.
I'm already swamped.
Yes.
I was getting all excited, Jim. I thought this was a mandate to let me go.
Well, you have to say no, please.
Yes.
Okay. Limit
Here's
what
what we'll
happened to do it.
We felt that anxiety, so we're gonna do something about it.
So-
You didn't pay me for that either.
Yeah. So here's a big idea that we're going to share with you, and that's called demand shaping, right? So demand shaping is helping us control that thing that you just mentioned, because now we have a lot of demand, and we're going to have to do something about it. Again, this takes time. This is why we say be patient with the process. You don't get to this step until you've actually proven your capability, right? But, yeah.
How many years have you been at it?
Oh, for us together, 6 years. Yeah, through several organizations. So each time we've had to create our capability and kind of, so yeah, good question. So to your point, we can't do everything, right? So let me just give you one example. One of our demand shaping strategies for engagement, right? So we're a coaching team. Whenever we have a request from a leader usually, and you saw on that demand curve, right? A lot of names of leaders that were part of those teams. We actually have a checklist that we call the leader commitment checklist, right? So some of you may actually use this yourself, right? But it's basically a very clearly spelled out list of these are the things that if you have us engage you and your team, we would expect as part of a commitment. So you would have to publicly say, these are the things that we're willing to do, right? Again, we're not forcing anybody to do the things that we're asking that we are capable of doing. It's usually the leaders that are going to say, no, I'm willing to commit to this. And we're very upfront too. We're like, hey, when we go through this is going to be tough in your environment, right? Because there's a lot of production still going on, right? There's still a lot of delivery. Sometimes they have to slow down, be able to actually learn some things. So a lot of leaders are very concerned about like how much productivity am I losing because of sending my team to go for training and whatnot and learning a new process. We built that all into our commitment checklist, right? And that tool in itself helped us demand shape a lot of the commitments that we had. A lot of leaders came to us and said, we're very interested, went down the list, they were like, that's something we're not prepared to do yet. And we, no judgment, we're like, yeah, that's actually okay. We're not gonna judge you. If this is not the right time, please let us know when the right time is to come. And actually, several times, and so I'm sure most of you are like, well, they'll probably never return. Most of the time, I would say more than half the time, the leader usually came back to us. Not only did they come back to us, they actually went through the checklist and said, we took care of these things, right? Really hard things like, you really need a location strategy. Like right now, we're in 6 different continents. How do we work as a team, right? So you guys have to actually, we're not telling you what to do, but you need to come up with a strategy about what's the right thing for you to do, right? So they would come back and say, yeah, we actually came up with a strategy, we executed it, now we're better. We're like, oh, great. So it seems like it, and then we engage, right? So that's one tool we use for demand shaping. Do you have any others you wanted to point
Can we
out?
tell the story?
Of
What's the-
yeah, here's the picture of the speakeasy. Anybody been to a speakeasy before, right? So what was the point of a speakeasy? Trent, you wrote your hand.
I mean, they exist during Prohibition when booze is illegal. So
Right.
they're very hard to find. You only get in if you know someone.
Exactly, right? Usually it's associated with a password and a certain knock, and you have to know somebody, and then you get in. Interesting enough, 2019 today, are there still speakeasies?
Call down for hours.
Well, yeah, after hours club, whatever, but why? Like, there's no longer prohibition.
Because we still have restrictions.
because of hipsters, yeah.
Playing on that.
Because-
They're playing on that.
Yes, exactly. That's exactly the point, right? So this is a special experience that you're gonna get, right? And not everybody comes to it. And again, you still have to know where to go find these. Much easier nowadays, you just Google it. But you still, I mean, I've been to a couple, you still need to ask for the password. They won't let you in. They're like, so what's the password? So Google it. So it's still, I mean, again, there are speakeasies today, but again, they're trying to demand shape for the type of customer that they want to serve. So it's funny that you mentioned hipsters. There's certain type of customers that they want in their club, right? That's why developer growth is a very effective thing, right? Everybody's standing out there, everybody wants to get in, right? But they're only going to accept the ones that they feel like this is our target environment, right? So that's the power of demand shaping. Next is, kind of goes hand in hand with, so not familiar, I don't know if you're familiar with this book, Orrin Hoff, right? So he's like a marketing genius, wrote this book called Pitch Anything. Title you can see up there, Innovative Method for Presenting, Persuading, and Winning the Deal, right? So he shares a lot of secrets from his life and his experience of how he's been so successful in the realm of sales and marketing to actually influence and create a lot of demand, right? So one of his techniques is called pricing, right? So pricing is basically a mindset shift to say, are you even worth my time to take you on as a client, right? Do I even want to serve you, right? So it's almost like a very elitist view of it, but that's kind of the way that he teaches this, which is, tell me more about yourself. Let me see if I'm interested in serving you, right? So pricing we do a lot of times, which is, we built up some credibility, but sometimes people come to us and they're like, so what can you do for us? And we're like, well, what can you do for us? We turn the tables, right? Like, tell us what is the benefit of us serving you as a team of coaches, right? So we prize it, and we have the option to say, well, maybe you're not the right customer for us right now.
What principle is, what influence principle is prizing engaging? Scarcity. So we learned this from Brendan Bochco, the other trainer, actually. He has a saying, always be busy. ABB, always be busy. When someone asks you, how's coaching going? We're swamped. We're really busy. And someone says, hey, I want to engage you. Say, yeah, okay, next week. We'll talk next week. I'll get on your calendar. because we're really busy right now. So you're actually talking about the things you're doing. You're creating scarcity in just even the interaction you're having, and it's valued. And then you're shaping demand by putting the criteria. So can I? Actually, we're going to show that. All right. So the board you have in front of you, it looks like a Kanban board, right? Except the columns are a little bit different. Anyone recognize what kind of board this might be if you're using those column names? Upstream. Upstream. This is upstream Kanban. So Patrick Steyer, our great colleague, genius, really created this innovation. This is a board which helps you shape and manage demand. This is not the actual commitment. That's not the actual task board. This is the work that you're going to do to figure out if someone is meeting your criteria, right, to do work with them. And as Adam mentioned before, some of our criteria is this, and it sounds easy or hard depending on which leader you're talking to. If you want training from us, then you as the executive are going to take the training with the people in the room. That's almost like, are you kidding me? I'm too busy. Yeah. Except they'll come back if they really want it. We've seen it time and time again. That's just another way, by the way. And by the way, if you're transparent about your upstream demand, then you're actually pitting your actual customers against each other. Which is always you're actually looking at your demand and going, well, I'm going to take whoever's next. I'm going to take whoever's the most ready. Are you the most ready? Are we ready to go? Okay, no, all right, I'm going to focus on the folks that are. So we invite you now with this board. In fact, I don't think we're not going to do extra. All right. With this board, think of a service that you provide and what criteria might you want to be explicit about, right? To create this pricing effect, to create this demand shaping effect, to create some scarcity effect. So that's when you talk to someone and say, hey, listen, oh, you want Kanban 101? All right, well, here's what we need, right? Maybe it's something like you provide lunch. Something in there that's a tell, right? Something that's actually demonstrating some form of commitment, scarcity and commitment, right? They have to do something to get your work. It doesn't have to cost money, but it has to be some sort of commitment, right? That shows that they mean business. Otherwise, you might actually be then taking on the wrong customer. If we go back to your crossing the chasm, you might be taking on a fake laggard or a fake late majority that's disguised as an innovator or an early adopter. And that demand shaping criteria will reveal that very, very quickly. All right? So we only have 1 minute left. We would like to thank you for coming here. We'll stick around. Well, actually, I don't know how much stuff is going on here. Adam has something free. So he's tricking you. He's tricking you. All right, he has something free to give out. Here's what we love to ask. So one, think about a service. This is your exercise, your homework. Think about a service that you currently do. What small list of criteria could you include as your demand shaping criteria? Right? Or at least to confirm that there is some commitment on the other side. That someone isn't just trying to drag you in and check the box. Say, hey, they served me, so we're good now. We're agile. Right? Anyone ever have that happen where you serve someone and they tell the rest of the world they're agile? That does not do good for your credibility. This is supposed to help catch that. So here's the last thing we want you to do for us, please. We've spent 2 hours with you and really appreciate your engagement and your candidness with each other. We'd love for you to share with us what your big idea. If you have one or more big ideas from this session, please just write it on a sticky and stick it on here. In fact, why don't we just move this toward the door?
Yeah, we'll move it through.
That just gives us feedback. We want to know what you actually got out of this, and we can tweak this moving forward. But with that, I want to thank you very much. So Adam?
Yeah, and so your free gift is, I'm sure some people are like, oh, I actually need a personal Kanban board. I'm going to give you one so you can have one to use. So just asking you to actually share some feedback. If you do use it, let me know how this is helping you. So just grab one for me.
Yes. All right, actually, I'm just going to take this off.
3 hours across with you, by the way.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you all very much.
Thank you.
Really appreciate it.